Zipho Sikhakhane is a sought-after global speaker, thought leader, writer, and business strategist. She also serves on several boards and has a Master of Business Administration from Stanford University in the United States. A lifetime entrepreneur and angel investor, she also founded EMZ Advisory, a management consulting firm operating since 2015, enabling leaders and businesses to unleash their growth potential. In this podcast, she shares about her journey to self discovery and accelerated growth in life, career, and business on a more intimate setting, a podcast.
Welcome to Mastery Sessions with Zipho.
Let's look at optimism as a leadership quality. When we're talking about optimism, right, it's that mindset of, being hopeful, right? Really being optimistic around the future and, being that kind of individual who predicts and really sees success as an actual predictable outcome, even in circumstances where we don't think it's possible, right? And it is about tendencies, right? And really encouraging yourself to think about how can I always perceive those favorable outcomes, even when I don't expect them. The more popular concept is always, there are those who see the glass half full, and there are those who see the glass as half empty. And we go as far as to say, there's a world of optimists, the world of pessimists. I don't like labels, to be honest. I think it's important to challenge yourself, right? Because I think, as we continue the conversation, you'll learn more about how the mind works. And it is harder and it is more difficult to see the world in a context where, the glass is actually half full. It's easy to see the empty. I mean, it's easy to understand where the empty is coming from and really unpacking it and understanding what to do. So let's talk about what optimism isn't, right? I'm not talking about, being extreme here. There's a concept called the optimism bias, right? So when you really underestimate everything, right? So and whether it's an accident, whether it's, you're sick, bad things happening to you, etc. Sometimes there's individuals who are just unrealistically positive, and that's not what we're talking about here. There's individuals who, believe they're smarter or even healthier or even, hardworking compared to the average person. There's also something called toxicity, toxic positivity, when, how dire the circumstances are, those people who just pretend to maintain a positive attitude. Now, there's a whole mix of emotions, right, that we have and we encompass as a human species. The point is to not disregard, some of them, even the more difficult ones like sadness, anxiety, things that come up in different contexts. It's important to learn to sit with the discomfort of the moment as and when it happens. And those are some of the things we'll unpack later. But in the context of optimism, you need to be able to realize that there's a space for both, right? So yes, there's the difficult moments that we face and we deal with, but there's a space for the other side. We're actually thinking about different ways around how can I make sure that I maintain my positive mindset. And let me tell you why these mindsets are so important and so critical in the context of business. I mean, I've had the privilege of running a business for many years now, leading a team and helping leaders of multinational corporations, particularly with operations in sub-Saharan Africa. And let me be honest, right? There's always difficult times. There's always periods that are very stressful, right? And it's not easy to see the silver lining, right? Especially given that every day is unpredictable. When you're in a context of scale, when you're in a context of growth, you could never really predict what it is that it's going to happen, right? So what I found important, right, is that it helps to see some of the opportunities, even in some of the moments where we think there's despair, there's no hope, and really maybe even one of the difficult moments that you've gone through. And I'll be honest, right? I mean, in the moment of difficulty, it is really hard when you're in that space. It is really hard to see the optimistic side, and that's okay. So when you look back, right, at some of the most difficult moments that you've gone through in life, right, and reflecting years back, you start realizing those were the biggest growth moments that you've ever possibly had in life, right? And even from my own journey and the many experiences that I've had, I actually find it difficult, when I'm asked the question, and I get this a lot, but can you tell us a moment where you failed in life? And I struggle with this. Not that because I've never failed at anything, but it's just not imprinted as failures in my DNA, right? I mean, for me, those are sort of moments of growth. Those are moments of courage. Those are moments of learning. And so it is difficult for me to come up with those examples because, again, I always look for that positive and optimistic outlook in different contexts, right? What I think is important is that when you're picking up the pieces, right, from whatever's going on around you, figure out how they can help you move on to something greater, a bigger idea, maybe, because ultimately, some of the craziest and maybe most insane things that have ever happened, they're also born from moments that we didn't even expect that they will be happening. And let's be honest, right? I mean, when you're existing as an individual in society, right? And maybe even when you're in a position where you're leading others, people are drawn, they're naturally drawn to the kinds of leaders around them who, are upbeat. They have a little bit of a positive attitude. And in the ever evolving world that we live in today, you need to be able to look beyond your immediate events and circumstances and really focus on what can be achieved to overcome those things. I mean, that's what ensures survival, that's what ensures continued success. Now, as an individual leader, thinking about how you effectively lead yourself, you need to cultivate optimism by also being open to different and multiple perspectives, right? And both optimistic and pessimistic. That's not the question here. You need to be able to look at different perspectives and then really leverage them and look at situations and angles, from all kinds of perspectives, so that you can figure out what you can really change, right, in the moment, and what you can do proactively to get to the other side. One of the quotes that really stands out for me every time I think about this topic is I think it goes something like a pessimist is someone who sees very difficulty, right, in every situation, and an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty, right? So it's not necessarily that you need to be always in a positive context or a positive environment for you to be able to leverage some of the techniques and the tools that we'll be discussing in this conversation. So there's different contexts also in terms of how, even some of the biggest leaders, right, in the world. If I were to think, and I did mention before, if I try and think of different examples, right, where I failed, my brain doesn't register the failure. I mean, it's registering growth, right, and probably lessons in life. And I think one of the biggest lessons, especially that I had, if I look at my context and what I've been through, is that I've realized that there was actually two kinds of energies, right? And the lesson was initially when I was younger, right? I was actually being driven by a very negative, right, energy. It was an energy of, running. So I thought I was being optimistic because I was working hard towards achieving certain goals, towards beating certain milestones, whether it was in my career, life, business in general, right? And they really pushed me to a certain point where I reached those milestones. I mean, it's part of why we're having this conversation. And I used that negative energy as what drove me. And I thought I was being optimistic because it helped me get to my goals, right? I mean, it gave me the way out of poverty. It allowed me to become a leader in business, right? But what it did, though, is the more I grew and the more I learned, right, then realized that energy of actually running when you're trying to escape, that's actually a survivalist type mindset, right? It's not a sustainable force that's actually going to allow you to keep going and enabling yourself. So when I started transitioning and I sort of, transitioned to, it's a positive energy, but it was a real optimism for me. I had a more positive energy that was driving me, right? And it started realizing that as much as it was still a form of running, right? Now I was running towards the positive. So a form of success that I believed that I could achieve, but I was looking at it from a positive perspective because there was a belief that I was going with it. The fact of the matter is that I'm not driven by more positive energy, right? It's the right kind of optimism, because now it's still driving me to what I want to achieve, and there'll always be milestones that I'm trying to get to, but it's not from an escape mindset. It's actually coming from excitement and positivity, right, to achieving something great. And, another example that I can share is that I've been very passionate, right? So in different contexts, I, give back by investing in early stage startups, different parts of the world. And there's somewhere it was a mistake, right? It's like, my heart's poured into it, but it may not have made sense from a business investment perspective. And so I learned a lot also from that, in terms of, okay, as much as I am optimistic in that context, because I believe in whatever idea or vision the entrepreneur is painting in front of me, there's also a piece there to it around, but how do you make sure that all the dots connect, right? So what are some of the things that I need to make sure I check for so that I look beyond just the essence of the optimism of the idea itself, but maybe there's a little bit more detail that I need to pierce through to understand some of the details. I think one of the things that maybe helped me more uniquely as an individual to identify with optimism so easily is that I'm a futurist at heart. I mean, I enjoy visioning. I see things vividly for me to believe that they're actually going to happen, and so the visualization processes really help me in many contexts, right? Because they allow me to then have that strength of being able to just see things in a way that maybe in a way that doesn't come easily for the average person, right? Because ultimately we're all manifestors, right? Of whatever we believe in, whatever we see. And I manifest it, I find ways of manifesting it in my head. But don't worry, I mean, if you're not a natural futurist on manifestors, we do have further content on some of the toolkits that you can leverage to get to that. If you're still not convinced at this point about working towards having optimism as a key in your leadership toolkit, there are some benefits, that go beyond, some of the more simpler things that people think about on a day-to-day basis. But it actually has been shown to increase your productivity as an individual, right? So it's showing from various sources, right, that optimistic people just generally work harder. Maybe because they can clearly see some of the goals that they're working towards because they spend so much time, right? Maybe visualizing or actually believing that what they want to manifest will actually happen. They maintain a positive outlook, right, which is then actually shown to increase their productivity and also just make them better and more effective individuals in life. The other thing to think about is that optimism actually begets optimism, right? So a good mood is contagious, right? I mean, smile, it's contagious, as they always say, and it's largely the same in this context, and. And let's be honest, right? In most contexts that we're in, we have to interact with other people, right? Particularly in the professional context, and we're constantly surrounded. I mean, whether it's your clients, it's your colleagues, it's direct reports, superiors, the last thing you need is that dreary individual, right? Yes, there's bad days, but seriously, all the way from Monday to Friday, people enjoy optimism, right? So and not just that, people approach you more, people enjoy interacting with you more because you don't drain their energy. You give them that fuel that they need. And something else to think about is that, when we're thinking about failure, right? Optimists over time, they really master this art of just not accepting failure as a normal course of their life. I mean, those people who have something bad happen in the morning and they just decide it ends today just because you spilled the coffee, right? At 6 a.m. It doesn't work like that, right? So what you find is the more optimistic you are, you start seeing, failure is normal, it's critical, and it's just something that happened and you keep carrying on, right? I mean, even if you look at, entrepreneurs, right? And I spent some time in Silicon Valley, right? Which is the global hub for global entrepreneurship, right? And one of the things that always impressed me there is that the entrepreneurs that are most respected, right, is the individuals who failed, right? We always ask the question, but have you actually failed at something, right? And I mean, even pitching, right? I mean, there'll be people who would pitch their business ideas, 40 to 80 times before they get the first yes. This is what this is about, right? And think about if you were pessimistic walking into this. I mean, you give up at the first hurdle. You go, maybe I shouldn't have done this idea. You take yourself out of the race. And even in terms of hardships, right? Which I'm sure you'll face. You need to be able to just dust things off, get back up, and whatever you perceive as a setback, find a way to respond, find a way to get up and keep moving and get to the other side. And also, guess what? Optimism is actually, it can make you healthier, right? If you just nurture your own sense of optimism, there's actually a study that was done by the University of Illinois, right? And in the United States. And it found that Actually, people were more optimistic. They were 76% more likely to have an ideal health score, right? I mean, they did so well on so many metrics, right? Whether it was diet, physical activity, whether it's blood pressure, cholesterol, anything, they showed up healthier. I mean, imagine this, right? It's something that's really critical. And also, so now, if you're not prepared to do it for your health, right, then do it for your growth and your learning. I mean, I assume that's why you even chose to listen to content like this. So it's also about growth for you as an individual, right? So if you think about it, um, you know, there's this concept of comfort zone, right? So a lot of us do things that within what's safe for us. So there's sort of that 50% space outside of it is what we're playing for. I'm not saying go 100% around outside your comfort zone here, but there's that 15% mark, just a little bit outside, right? Where you're actually encouraged to try something new. Now, for pessimists, it's very hard to play in that space. It's like, can you keep it the same? Can you keep exactly all my routines exactly the same? And I'm saying what happens when you challenge that 15% just a little bit, right? Because in business, there's nothing more important than this. In life, there's nothing that's more important than this. There's an old adage that most people reference, which is nothing risked, nothing gained, right? So business is all about innovation, right? And if you are afraid to try something new, you won't get anywhere. And so really challenge yourself to say, you know what? I need to bring that newness. I need to be able to bring that innovation. And I know I may be afraid to try something new, but what happens if I just go a little bit outside of my comfort zone, just a little bit? Imagine what would happen when you do that.